Welcome everybody. This is Mark David, founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. We are back here for the online Eating Psychology Conference, and I have the very great pleasure to be with Joanna Poppink. Welcome. And
thank you.
I'm gonna say a few words about you to our viewers, and then we can get going. Joanna is a marriage and family therapist, Los Angeles psychotherapist since 1980. So she's been doing this for a while, specializing in eating disorder recovery and women's issues. So she is both in private practice and a public speaker. Joanna has authored a fabulous, fabulous book, which is how I found this wonderful woman, and it's called Healing Your Hungry Heart, Recovering from Your Eating Disorder, and that's with Conari Press. And her internationally acclaimed interactive website is, look at that book, beautiful cover. It's really pretty, actually. Her internationally acclaimed interactive website is read by thousands. Joanna herself recovered from bulimia and uses her professional expertise and personal knowledge to support her clients through their life challenges to a life of freedom. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And my first question for you, and we already know a tiny bit about your personal journey, but if you can say more about what led you to really being in the therapist's office, to doing the work that you do with women, to working with eating issues, working with women, what inspired you to write, and exactly what do you do?
Okay,
I'll take big questions.
I'll take it. I went back to college in 1977. I had been a junior for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to finish. Now, life in the 70s was different than life is now. So there were no returning older students. I was in classrooms with 18-year-olds. So my peers were my professors. And I was having lunch with one of them and asking questions about social psychology, because that's what he did. And he interrupted the conversation and he said, Joanna, no matter what we talk about, no matter what we study, no matter what you study and what you think you're interested in, I will tell you that 20 years from now, you're going to be talking to women about what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. I said, what? He said, nobody's doing this. I was in my 30s. How old was I? 33 when I went back to school. He said, nobody's doing this, but they will. And women are going to want to know what it's like, how to do it, how to start growing again, how to redevelop and move on in something new. He didn't know I had an eating disorder. And I certainly didn't plan on specializing in eating disorders. But I was one, I had one, I lived through one. So in my practice, when I started my private practice, I was focusing on guided imagery and having a general practice and looking at the unconscious. But as people came through, somebody would have an eating disorder, or somebody's child would have an eating disorder, and they weren't getting adequate treatment or understanding. And I knew, and I was so full of myself because I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. But I was called to work with these people, and word gets around through the conscious and unconscious network, where eating disorder people started coming to me, and I started learning about it. I got better at it, much better at it, once I learned that my way of having an eating disorder wasn't the only way. Mm-hmm. Now, I am kind to myself about this now, because I thought it was all ego in the beginning. My way is the way. But when I think about it now, there was so little known about eating disorders. It didn't have a name when I had an eating disorder. That when the name came out, I thought that this was it. I had no idea how vast it could be and how many ways there were to act out an eating disorder. And I certainly hadn't a clue about why or where it came from. But I started to learn. And my colleagues, again, were older. They were senior clinicians. They knew much more about doing therapy than I did. But I knew much more about having an eating disorder than they did. So we would talk, and they learned from me, and I learned from them. It was a glorious collaboration, one that I really treasure. You wanted to get into mine before I got into what I do now? Is that what you asked? Forgive me the order.
The order doesn't matter. It's however you answer it.
I had an eating disorder without knowing that it was one. It started when I was about 13. I started throwing up. It was a trick that worked. I was under a lot of pressure to look good and eat a lot at the same time. And I found a way to do it by eating a lot as I was supposed to and throwing up. It got out of hand. I knew no other way to function. I tried everything to stop. As a child, I remember sitting in front of the television set, cutting up fruit. Cutting it up, I mean lots of fruit, and cutting it up into little teeny tiny bits so that it would take the time before I started eating. Because maybe when I finished cutting it all up, I wouldn't want to eat it anymore. Maybe I could do it that way. But of course, but maybe it took some time out of the binging. When it got really bad, when I was in my early 30s, it was maybe binging and purging 12 times a day, not being able to get out of the house because I was going to do it one more time. And I could live up to the house for 3 or 4 days. It was terrible, really terrible. And it was a secret, nobody knew. Finally, I got into supervision with a wonderful clinician, Hedda Volgar, who just died May 13. I'll be going to her memorial later this month. But I got into supervision with her. After 9 months, I told her that I was bulimic, expecting to be thrown out of the profession. She changed from my supervisor to my analyst, and we started working. But when I told her, I thought I was going to be thrown out of the profession. I told an Irish alcoholic psychiatrist, recovering, because he was showing me AA meetings, I told him. He burst into tears, put his hands together, prayed, and said, I think this is what grace means, for us to come together in that way. Mm-hmm. I was flabbergasted. I told one other person, I remember in order, that I told a friend of mine, and she said, Joanna, I think if you told me you murdered somebody, I would think, well, she must have had a good reason. This was ESP. It wasn't that she said that. She was an anthropologist and her specialty was studying psychics. Because what I had said to myself for years was, is there something worse I could do than this? And the only thing I could think of that would be worse would be murdering somebody. I mean, the self-incrimination and criticism was that powerful. Mm-hmm. And she picked up on it. She used the exact word that I had used for 20 years, trying to think that there'd be something worse in life to do than this. But my saga has a very happy outcome because I got better. I got better through working in psychoanalysis, working with dreams, going to 12-step programs, art classes, creativity classes, writing, growing, learning, having beautiful support from friends, lots of love, all of it comes in. And I learned to eat. I learned how to eat, which I didn't know. So what I do now is I work with women. The youngest is usually about 24. The oldest is 92. But I work with adult women. Most of them have eating disorders or had an eating disorder or had a child with an eating disorder, or somewhere there's an eating disorder in the mix. And I work with them now that I know that there are many more ways to have an eating disorder than my way. I continue working with them when the eating disorder is over. And this may be very good news to the people who are listening and watching who have an eating disorder. We can end the eating disorder, but just because the eating disorder behavior stops doesn't mean you're out of the woods. When your eating disorder started, your development as a human being stopped. There's all kinds of challenges that you didn't have to meet and master because you used your eating disorder to get by. So when the eating disorder is gone, when that behavior stops, you are left without those skills, without that knowledge, without that insight, without that emotional perception, without that being able to read people in certain ways that help you survive. You don't have any of that because you used the eating disorder for that. So my work continues with the person as those things get developed. So in a way, I specialize in working with people with eating disorders. But I also specialize in working with people who don't have an eating disorder, but have or have had a skirmish with one.
Mm-hmm. So is there, in your view, given that you've gone down this journey yourself and you're working with women who are on the journey now or recovering, what's the purpose? Why do we have eating disorders? Why are they here? What do they do? Is there a broader, bigger, wiser reason for their existence? Are they just a nuisance? What's going on?
Well, this is where I get in trouble. But I tell my truth and what I think is the truth.
Please.
Yes. Eating disorders save lives. They can kill you, and often do. It's the most lethal mental disorder to have. But nobody picks up an eating disorder for no reason. And to use such a drastic system means that there must be something drastic happening. To save your life, you have to either protect yourself or find a way to hide or find a way to pass in plain sight, to find some way to cope with something that you cannot bear. Now, your psyche will say death means dead, physically dead, but death also means to go crazy. Because if you go crazy, you're not there anymore. Your identity is gone. Your mind will accept that as a form of death and will do everything possible to keep you alive. That means you're going to stay sane and you're going to stay breathing with the heart pumping and blood flowing. When someone, I used to say a child, but now we see adults that begin eating disorders. When someone is in a situation that they cannot cope with, they cannot bear, they have no tools to function, they can't escape, they've got to do something to stay alive, sane or alive or both. Some people move to drugs. Some people move to alcohol. Some people move to other compulsive behaviors. Some people move to eating disorders. And it works. Except they've caught a tiger by the tail because the eating disorder itself becomes dangerous to them. And to drop the eating disorder means to feel, whether it's real or not anymore, that you are in a very dangerous place with no way to take care of yourself. So that's the first hurdle to recovery. Because who would want to go there? You try everything in the world to take care of yourself and keep your eating disorder, or drop it a little bit or tweak it a little bit, but you want it when you need it. And to actually let it go and feel those fears requires a lot of courage and trust and determination. The good news is that eating disorders are not for the faint of heart. In order to maintain an eating disorder, and people, please listen to this with an open mind and honesty about yourself, even if you're accustomed to criticizing yourself a lot. Listen to this. To have an eating disorder, you have to be able to plan. You have to be able to organize. You have to be able to maintain secrets. You have to have determination and commitment. You have to figure out how to get the resources to maintain your eating disorder. Now these are terrific qualities to have. If you take the eating disorder out and you use those qualities for something else, what could you do? I mean, that's a question I ask. I ask it in the book and I ask it in my practice. And I asked it to myself when I was in early recovery. If I put all this energy that I use for my eating disorder into something else, what could I do? When I ask it of patients, I remember one mumbled with her head down, and she mumbled. I said, what did you say? Would you say that a little louder, please, so I could hear? She said, I could run 3 Fortune 500 companies. I said, you probably could. What could you do? Not only the binging and the purging, not only the eating, not only the starving, but the planning and the obsessing and the mirror time and the criticism, all that energy into something else. What could you do? Because that's where recovery is. That's where recovery leads us. You get all your resources and you're able to use them in life. That's why I do it, because it is such a sensational job to meet people who are just so angry at themselves and feeling like such failures because everything they try to do does not end the eating disorder, and to show them that they've been putting their energy into directions that don't work. And when we put them into directions that do work, they blossom and the eating disorder falls and they move into a life that is beyond what they could have imagined.
I love the, I'm going to call it a reframe of, wow, here's what one needs to do to have an eating disorder. The planning, the management, the forethought, the secrecy, the how do I marshal my resources, and those are all truly life skills that one is...
Dedication, concentration.
Yeah, it's amazing. And indeed, I can think of the many people, especially women I've met with eating disorders, who are on it. They are bright. They are alert. They've got it going on. And here's this eating disorder. And really what you're saying is, wow, okay, so here's all this energy that's going to a place ultimately that doesn't serve us as humans in the big picture. And wow, what happens if it's redirected to a positive place? So how do you as the therapist invite people onto that journey? Do they come to you knowing that I'm embarking on this journey? Do they just come to you like, hey, Joanna, fix me?
Some people come fix me. They don't stay. Some of them stay if they allow themselves. because you don't get fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You drop something and feel worse, and then you reassemble in a different way. So people come to me when everything else they've tried has failed. They've tried every diet, they've read every book, they've been to therapists who were probably, some of them could have been very good therapists, but didn't know anything about eating disorders, and tried things like structuring your day and monitoring your food and keeping food journals without, and those that have their place. They have their place. But if they're not done in the right way with somebody with an eating disorder, they'll trigger the eating disorder. Mm-hmm. Because the eating disorder will feel threatened. The person will feel threatened that they're going to lose their eating disorder and they don't have anything in place. So people come when they just are at their wit's end, and they come like they feel failures, and when they're ready, when they feel that bad, they're usually ready for something new because everything else didn't work. So now they know it's not in their imagination what will work.
It seems like associated with the conversation of eating disorders, particularly when we're speaking about women, we're often walking side by side with this thing called perfection, or the search for perfection. So my question for you is, from your vantage point, why are so many women seeking the perfect body or perfection in any other realm? And kind of how do you hold that? How do you contain that? What do you do with it?
I'm smiling because it really is simple.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what perfection is, what is perfection? Perfection is beyond criticism.
Love it.
If something's perfect, there is absolutely nothing to criticize. It is the end-all and be-all. It is perfection. There's no safer place in the world to go. If you are perfect, there's no self-criticism from you. There's no criticism from anybody else. You are safe. Very similar to what the woman wants with the eating disorder, looking for that perfect safety. So any flaw doesn't mean, you see people who seem to have absolutely beautiful faces or beautiful body or beautiful hair or beautiful something, and they see one little teeny tiny flaw and they are extremely upset about it. And it seems trivial. It seems vain. It seems stupid. It seems like, but that's not what it's about. It's like diving deep with your scuba gear and noticing one teeny little hole in the oxygen tube. That's going to mean death if you can't get out of there. So somebody looking for perfection in the ways that we're talking about it, associated with eating disorders or near, means perfection is the safe place where nobody can harm me. And if I have a little flaw, if I gain an ounce, if my hip on one side isn't exactly the same shape as the hip on the other side, if I've got a pimple on my nose, it's something. It means that I'm not perfect, and that means that whatever it is can get me. I'm really vulnerable then, and there's nothing I can do about it. Once somebody knows that, it gives them the beginning of freedom from that perfection. Does that seem obvious once you say it?
It does, and it's we do want that safety, don't we? We do want to be protected. We do want to be beyond reproach, beyond criticism, because then I'm okay. And I'm assuming that there's also a sense of then you'll love me because I'm perfect.
Love's more complicated.
Is it?
You notice that? When somebody is obsessing about food or weight or being cared about or getting attention, love is not understood. Love gets mixed up with safety. Love gets mixed up with attention. Love gets mixed up with comfort and support. And if you have trouble making the distinction, you can think about if somebody supports you, and you think you love them for that, or you think they love you for that, are they easily replaced? Can you get somebody else to support you? Because often you can. And then you get that safe, warm, okay feeling again. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not love. Love is something else. Love is something that people grow into as they heal and develop. People express about all kinds of love, and some of it is not the real thing.
Mm-hmm. So you just defined it in part as something that we grow into, that develops.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As we do. We have to be capable of it.
What's love got to do with it then when it comes to the conversation of a woman and food and her relationship with her body? Because it seems, here you are dealing with the feminine population, and I'm going to make the assumption that men and women are different. So
I used to think so, but there's an awful lot in common coming up now with body obsession. And
yeah, absolutely. So really, my question is again, where does love fit into the equation when it comes to a disordered relationship with food? How do you see it factor in?
To be a therapist and to work with a client or a patient with something like an eating disorder or concern about love and body image and all these things that you describe, we have to be revolutionaries. I, as a therapist, am a revolutionary. My patient wants to get better, she has to be a revolutionary. It's not easy to be a revolutionary. A lot of revolutionaries get shot because they disrupt the status quo. And our status quo needs to be disrupted for people to get better. Let me see if I can get a shortcut answer for you. I give patients an assignment when the time is right. And that is, go outside in your day, in your life, pay attention to the people on sidewalks, pay attention to the people standing in line to go to the movies, pay attention to people in restaurants, pay attention to people in the parks, and pay attention to who's in a couple where they're holding hands, where they're being nice to each other, where they're kissing in an affectionate way, where they look like they're really happy to be with each other. You notice those people and come back and tell me about them. And so far, it's 100%. They come back shocked. I saw a fat woman who looked happy with a man. I saw an old woman who looked happy with a man, with an older man, with a younger man. I saw two fat people smiling and laughing and pushing a baby carriage. This from a woman who is tall and lean and gorgeous and lonely and desperately wants a child and is isolated. And she sees some fat people having what she wants. I said, all right, let's get your head out of the TV, out of the magazine, out of the media, and look at human beings, because you are one. And what is being pushed, what is being sold, what is creating financial empires is your fear. That's very difficult. That's very difficult to understand and accept because the pressure it permeates our lives. But there are people in wheelchairs who have love in their life, people who are ugly, who have love in their life, people who are bald, who have love in their life, people who are disfigured in some way, who have love in their life, but they don't sell commodities. You know how much makeup and how much surgery and how much cinching can you do? Human beings are still out there living and loving. So that has to be attended to. What does it mean to be human? I had a patient who stood up in my office, this office, stamped her feet, and had a full-on 2-year-old tantrum. I don't want to be human. And went on. And when she got tired, I said, I can do many things for you and with you, but I can't help you change your species. He was livid. Just livid. It's such a shock. To know that you're being drugged by all this stuff coming in through the airways and through the movies and TV. It's entertaining as long as you know it's entertaining. When it moves out of entertainment and becomes defining you and what you have to do and be in order to function and survive and get whatever goodies in life that you think are important.
Well, you use the term revolutionary. You said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, for me to do my job here as a therapist, I have to be a revolutionary. For my client to do her job, to step into healing, recovery, transformation, she's got to be a revolutionary, which I love that because it really, to my mind, speaks to the magnitude of the process and respects it for what it is. It's not like taking out a little splinter that's stuck in my finger. That's less of a revolutionary act by far. You're clearly getting in with people and diving deeper. Let me ask you the question of, people will often come to us and say, I'm stuck. Here I am. I'm stuck with this thing at work. I'm stuck in this relationship, or I've got this creative block, or I'm stuck with this eating pattern. Stuck. How do you manage this place called I'm stuck?
Well, Jung said it before we got into mindfulness in this country. Carl Jung said, when there's no place to go, when every solution fails, when every horizon is limited, when you're stuck, when you can't move, when there's nothing that you can possibly do to correct or help yourself, there's only one option left. Grow. And you can take that on any level that you're able to receive it. If you can't see anything, look at a child walking in the house and can't see out the window. There's no way that you can see out the window until it grows. And then there's this whole new perception that's available because it grew. What happens with us too, psychologically and emotionally? I think of it as if you put on new glasses, it doesn't help clarify one thing. You put on new glasses, you've got a new lens that sees everything more clearly. Options that you didn't know you had, you can see. Have to grow. But how does somebody do it when they're stuck? So they come to me, and first they talk. They talk a lot about how they're stuck and why they're stuck and why there's no way that they can be unstuck and that I can't do anything and they can't do anything, but they wanted to give it a shot because they were stuck. Mm-hmm. That can take a day, or that can take weeks, that can take months. I don't know. But while we're doing that, they get the experience of me being with them and listening and hearing. Now, listening is a big word. You probably know this from your work. You listen by being available. You listen by being open. You listen by, you can't listen if you're distracted. So you listen by being fully present. You listen by having empathic responses that the person can see, and the person can see that they're correct. That I really do get what they're saying, and what they're feeling, and what their experience is. And their breathing starts to come down. It starts to even out. And now they know, it's mysterious still, but they know that I know. They know that I did something now, so that I know what they're talking about, when nobody else did or could appreciate it. And what I'm doing is being present. And they're in my environment, so I am present for them. That's when they start to learn that they could be present too. So we start talking about and looking at different ways for them to be present. Journaling, mindful moments, drawing, listening in detail to music. There's one thing I do, it's harder to do with DVDs. It was better with VCRs. But maybe you can, it's better with the videotapes. But what it is you watch a movie, and you watch a movie and you get distracted for a minute, or the phone rings, or something happens, and then you come back and it's not quite the same as it was, but you can fill in what it was. You can figure out what has happened. So you can continue on. The exercise is reverse the tape, go back to where you remember and where you were interrupted, and watch again. And see what really happened, rather than what you filled in during the time that you were distracted. It's a different movie. You filled in something that might be interesting. Because you have a good experience with the movie, but it's not the movie that was made. That's not what the character said. And when people do this, they get the experience of what happens when they're not present. Because if you and I are talking and then I suddenly get an association and I think about my dog or my daughter or a patient I saw last week or an experience I had, and then I come back, I was only gone for maybe 10 seconds. And we can fill in and I can pick up the conversation. But what did I pick up? I missed 10 seconds and I'm filling it in with my stuff, not what you actually said. So that's one of the ways to learn to be present. You get into mindfulness exercises. My book is full of exercises about how to do this. And it's full of support for how to get past your defenses that prevent you from doing this. Because this is key. This is crucial.
So what do you see as some of the main obstacles that would really challenge women in this case to have a better life, to grow, to improve?
One of them is that the answers don't seem to make sense. They don't seem to make intuitive sense. They don't seem related. Why? If I am eating too much or being so concerned about my body that it's debilitating, or if I have closets and closets full of clothes, but still it's not right for this occasion, I'm not looking right, and I'm going to have disaster because I don't look right. How how does journaling possibly relate to that? What is sitting quietly for 60 seconds looking at a tree? How is that possibly going to affect my relationship with Haagen-Dazs? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's one of the biggest obstacles, because the person is focused on what they see as the problem, and they don't understand that the solution is not directly connected with the problem in terms of action. It's about confidence, it's about presence, it's about being secure in your ability to take care of yourself. Not secure because you're safe and hidden away and nobody can get to you, but secure because you know that if something comes up, you can deal with it. And how do you get there? Learning those ways has a direct application to how you are in your relationships, what kind of people you choose, whether you choose an abuser or an exploiter or somebody who's kind or somebody who's honest or somebody who really will be there for you, whether you speak up to an employer or not, whether you say no to an overload of work or say yes and continue to people please until you are drowning in a sea of work that you could never finish. So the obstacle is about not believing that these answers do exist, but in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
We can't help you. You're just going to talk about poetry. You're not going to help me. You're just going to ask me about what dreams I had last night. What does that have to do with the fact that my husband is drinking all the money and I can't buy shoes for the children? But it does relate. Just not fast. That may be another obstacle, looking for a quick solution, because there isn't one.
Yeah, we love fast as a culture. Fast is sexy. And fast makes things happen fast.
Well, that's a very interesting statement to make, Mark, because I would think that most women wouldn't think that fast is sexy.
Mm-hmm.
They like it to build.
Yeah.
They do like it to build, and they understand that. There's no fast answers. If it is fast, even if they're a climax, you miss out on a lot.
Well, that's the false promise of fast.
Yeah.
It seems like it's going to get us where we want to go. And it doesn't seem to do that. So, from this place of, well, gosh, how is this going to help me? How is looking at a tree going to help me? How is getting present going to help me? How is journaling going to help me? It seems that, the mind or the soul needs to be sometimes trained to make these rich connections. I know when I'm able to make connections, I feel really good. It's like having a great meal.
It's exciting too, and it's you just feel more alive.
Mm-hmm.
Not exciting like, oh my gosh, but exciting in that you feel more vibrant and you're more available to good things in the world and more perceptive about bad things that you don't want to be part of. You don't want.
So one of the connections I wanted to ask you about that I notice a lot, and I've been putting more attention on this as I speak with people about their eating challenges, their relationship with food, women or men, but especially women, I notice that oftentimes when I'm addressing a woman who has a challenge with eating or an eating disorder, there seems to be a history, or commonly, more commonly than I would have expected, a history of sexual abuse, or there's a sense of I'm not in my sexuality, I don't have an intimate relationship, I got to keep that over here because I'm not there yet. What have you noticed around the connections between our relationship with food, with eating disorders, and sex, sexual abuse, our sex life, our intimate life? What are the connections?
Well, let's start off with children.
Mm-hmm.
There's sexual abuse in childhood. Doesn't mean that everybody who's sexually abused is going to have an eating disorder. But I don't think anybody escapes unscathed from having sexual abuse as a child. It manifests itself in some way. Who's the abuser? A stranger? A family member? That makes a difference too. If it's a family member, and you've got a child, this is not a developed mind, and she doesn't have resources to take care of herself in the world, she's got to stay where she is. Can't earn a living. She can't go out and find a new home. She's got to stay there. So her mind has got to make sense out of this horrible thing that is happening. And what she often does is splits. Daddy is wonderful, and a monster comes into my room at night. Two different beings. I'm afraid of the monster. I love my daddy. That's how she manages it. In order to do that, because she can't turn a real person into two things, she's got to divide up in herself. And she's got to maintain that split. An eating disorder will help. Because the eating disorder, when you're acting out the eating disorder, it's easier to think of acting out when you are binging and purging or binging, because then you're doing something. Anorexia, you're still acting out by not doing something. Because if you don't eat, you still change your consciousness and your mental ability to perceive. The brain is malnourished, and distorted thinking comes up and distorted perceptions come up. So you see what you decide you are seeing, and use your eating disorder to get away from anything that's going to interfere with your sense of safety. That gets maintained. Unfortunately, we have a child who gets to grow up, gets to leave the household. She's still split. Her psyche is still split. She'll be attracted to charmers who abuse her. And she'll be so surprised when they abuse her, because they were so charming. And she won't leave the relationship, because it's the same split that she had as a child that she remembers. She knows. It's not even remembering it. You remember something that's over, and it comes back to you. But I'm talking now about something that happened that's in her that never left. It's the same. It's not remembering it. It's still being there 20, 30 years later. And she can't leave because you don't leave. And the abuse happens. And it happens whether it's a marriage or long-standing, or if it's somebody that she picks up in a bar who is very nice at the counter drinking, and then they get to the bedroom and he's horrible. But that's normal. That's what always happens. That's the way it is. I'll have to think about it before, during, or after, so that I don't mind so much, because it was worth it to get the charm, and I just have to put up with the abuse. So I say no to the abuse, and I'm not going to have the charm, and that's love, isn't it?
I'm
What? I've got a chair in my gut.
right now I'm just reminded and blown away at how we seem to be very able to repeat sort of the childhood wound as adults. And it doesn't just have to be the sexual wound. It could be any wound that we adapt to, we make sense of, how do I manage this? And then we carry it into adult life, constantly repeating it. What do you see as kind of breaking that cycle?
Working with somebody, I say therapist because that's the world I live in, but I imagine there could be other people too, who have done their own work. Because what happens, I mean, you and I are talking and we've got words going back and forth and people are watching and listening to these words, but I don't know how much gets communicated via Skype in terms of presence. Mm-hmm. Which is why telephone therapy is okay in an emergency and Skype therapy is okay in an emergency, but there's nothing like two people being in the room because you feel the energy from one another. And I've done my work and I know how to be present. And I know one of my great mentors and heroes is Winston Churchill. And he said, you must be able to meet the enemy with a steady gaze. And he's talking about Hitler. Mm-hmm. To meet all that horror with a steady gaze. Well, that's what therapists have to do. They have to be with the patient and meet whatever horror they're going through with a steady gaze and with a presence. Because in that, the patient learns that it's possible. And that is all the difference, no matter what words we say. It's happening, and I'm present, and I can hear it, and I can bear it. And if I can bear it, well, maybe someday they'll be able to bear it. And if they can bear it, think it, feel it, then they can heal it and be done with it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that is emanated. I don't know how that is. There aren't any words for that. But it's there. And I think you and anybody who's watching can think back in their lives to people where they feel better when they're with them. They don't have to say anything. You feel more calm when you're with somebody. Not anybody, but somebody. There are other people where you have to get away from them because you can feel rage or you can feel irritation or you can feel discomfort. Nobody's using any words, but you get it. And you know if you're attracted to it, repelled by it, or nourished by it. And that's what can happen in the room, which is also why I say that you can't do this kind of healing by yourself. Mm-hmm. You need another person. Now, it could be a therapist. It could be in a 12-step group, where you find someone. It could be in a church association, some kind of spiritual association, or a mindfulness group, someplace where there are people there, or at least one person, who can be present for whatever it is. Because then you've got the evidence that it's possible. And if one human being can do it, well, I'm a human being, I qualify. I should be able to do this too. Mm-hmm. That's where we go. That's the ultimate. And through it, it's family, and how to deal with conversations, and how to deal with going to the buffet dinner, and how to deal with Christmas and Hanukkah, and Aunt Lucy, who insists that you eat her vanilla cream pie, or she cries, and all of the details. What to do when your children only eat pizza, and that's a danger food for you. Not to eat the leftovers, and they leave so much left over, and it seems like a waste of money. How to go into portion control for your family and yourself, and tolerate the feelings that come up for you. It's all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But bottom line is development as a human being so you can be present for what is and know how to cope with what is.
Joanna, so many wonderful words of wisdom. I personally feel very filled, and when we finish this interview, I'm gonna start taking all the notes that are in the back of my mind that I've been remembering as we've been speaking, because there's just been, so many great gems. How can viewers stay in touch with you, with your world, be in contact? Where do we go?
I have a website, eatingdisorderrecovery.com, but poppink.com will also get you there.
Can you spell that?
poppink.com or www.eatingdisorderrecovery.com. There's my blog, articles, the people leave comments, and the comment sections turn into discussion groups where they just keep talking to each other. There's a forum. I respond. If you write on my site, I respond. My email is, my name is Joanna Poppink. My email is joanna@poppink.com. And of course, there's Healing Your Hungry Heart. It's available where all fine books are sold. You can get it on Amazon, it's in Kindle, it's in paperback. And that's me, Los Angeles.
Yeah, and it's, you're one of a small number, I'm going to say, of authors who I've heard speak now, who your writing and your presence are very similar. Like there's a timelessness that comes through when you speak. There's also a timelessness that comes through when you write. A deeper place emerges in both. So I applaud you for that. I thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Really a pleasure, Mark. I've enjoyed this tremendously. You're just a wonderful interviewer.
Yay.
Very fine work with this conference.
Thank you so much. And to the viewers, this has been Mark David on behalf of the Online Eating Psychology Conference. I've been speaking with Joanna Poppink, amazing therapist, author, and my best wishes to you and all your amazing work.
Thank you.